Let's begin with the big idea on the screen: why listening sells more than talking. Most people think sales is about saying the right thing at the right time, the perfect pitch, the clever close. But as this title suggests, the real advantage is quieter. It's listening, not passively, not politely, but intentionally. Listening as a strategy, listening as leverage. Sales at its core is a human conversation, not a performance. And the moment you understand that, everything starts to shift. As this opening slide hints, empathetic engagement isn't a soft skill, it's a hard advantage. When people feel understood, they lower their guard. And once the guard is down, trust can finally walk in. Now, as we move forward, keep this question in the back of your mind. When was the last time you felt truly heard? And how did that change your behavior? On the next slide, we see what we'll be exploring together. Notice the structure here. We're not jumping straight into tactics. We're first looking at the cost of talking too much, then the power of listening, and only after that, how to apply it in real conversations. This matters because most sales advice skips straight to scripts and frameworks. But without the right mindset underneath, those tools don't land. They feel mechanical, and prospects can sense that instantly. Now, let's look at what this slide calls the sales trap. Many sales conversations fail for a simple reason. The client doesn't feel understood. Not because the product is bad, not because the price is wrong, but because the salesperson is already thinking about their next sentence instead of the other person's meaning. Research backs this up. Top sales performers aren't just better talkers, they're significantly better listeners. They ask better questions, they pause longer. They resist the urge to fill silence. And that silence, that's where the truth usually shows up. Think about a time someone tried to sell you something without really listening. You probably felt rushed or unseen or subtly pushed. And even if the offer was good, something felt off. That's the trap. Now look at the next idea. Listening builds trust. Presence signals respect, and respect opens doors. When someone realizes you're not trying to dominate the conversation, they relax. Their shoulders drop. Their answers get more honest. Dale Carnegie talked about this decades ago, long before modern sales analytics. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And caring in sales looks a lot like listening. Imagine two advisors. One talks for most of the meeting, explaining features and benefits. The other asks thoughtful questions, reflects back what they hear, and adjusts as the conversation unfolds. Who would you trust more with an important decision? Now here's your first value checkpoint. If this way of thinking already feels useful, if you're starting to see sales differently, you might want something you can come back to later. If you want a step-by-step guide to follow along, you can download the PDF linked below and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the deeper lessons we'll uncover. Let's continue. This next slide is one of the most important. Needs surface in silence. The most valuable information often appears after you stop talking. That sounds simple, but it's surprisingly hard in practice. Silence makes people uncomfortable. We rush to fill it with explanations, reassurances, features. But when you pause, when you let a question breathe, you give the other person space to think. And thinking leads to clarity. Neil Rackham's spin selling framework is built on this idea. The best insights don't come from pitching. They come from exploring the situation, the problem, and its implications. Silence is what allows those implications to surface. A software founder once shared that his biggest deals came after he stopped demoing immediately. Instead, he asked one question: what's breaking in your workflow right now? And stayed quiet. The answers shaped the entire sale. Next, we arrive at objections. This slide reframes something crucial. Objections are signals. Most people hear objections as resistance, but objections are actually information. They're signals pointing to something unresolved: fear, timing, priorities, uncertainty. When you listen for the root cause instead of defending your position, the conversation changes tone. It becomes collaborative, almost problem-solving in nature. Stephen Covey's idea, seek first to understand, applies perfectly here. When someone says, "This feels expensive," they're rarely talking about money alone. They're talking about risk or trust or value. If you respond too quickly, you miss that signal. If you listen, you uncover it. Now look at the next slide. Listening compounds over time. Short-term persuasion can close a deal, but long-term listening builds loyalty. And loyalty is where real growth lives. Follow-up conversations, feedback loops, remembering what mattered to someone months ago. These are small acts, but they compound. Matthew Pollard often emphasizes that listening is a competitive advantage, especially for those who don't fit the stereotypical loud closer image. Consistent attentiveness builds relationships that outlast transactions. Think about clients who come back to you again and again. It's rarely because you talked the most. It's because you remembered, you adjusted, you listened. Which brings us to empathy. This slide says it clearly. Empathy persuades quietly. When people feel understood, persuasion doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like alignment. You're no longer convincing, you're clarifying. Empathy isn't agreeing with everything someone says. It's understanding why they say it. And once you understand their perspective, your solution naturally fits into their world. Mike yesterday frames this as selling clarity instead of confidence. Confidence can feel loud. Clarity feels safe. Now, before we move into actions, pause here for a moment. As you think about listening, about silence, about empathy, what stands out most so far? Is it the discomfort with pauses, the way objections could be handled differently, or the idea that trust is built long before the close? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'm curious which part of listening you find hardest or most powerful. Let's talk about it. Now let's ground all of this in action. This slide is about applying the idea today, not someday. Aim for listening more than talking. Pause after key questions. Paraphrase before you propose. Log one insight after every call. These aren't dramatic changes. They're subtle shifts, but subtle shifts compound faster than bold promises. One sales leader shared that simply paraphrasing client concerns reduced misunderstandings overnight, not because it was clever, but because it showed respect. Now, this next slide asks a single question. Where in your next conversation could listening change the outcome? This is where insight becomes practice. Maybe it's your next sales call. Maybe it's a team meeting. Maybe it's a customer support email. Don't rush past this question. Sit with it, because the answer is probably closer than you think. And now the conclusion. The quiet advantage isn't about being passive. It's about being intentional. Listening doesn't weaken your message, it sharpens it. The most effective salespeople understand this. They don't chase control, they build understanding, and understanding creates momentum. If you want to turn these ideas into something actionable, grab the PDF in the description, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future insights like this. Because the next breakthrough in your sales process probably won't come from saying more. It'll come from listening better.